We kind of talked about this last time. Most practical view of schizophrenia etiology is the diathesis-stress model. If an individual has a predisposition for the vulnerability, that's diathesis, and a stressful event occurs, then potentially one of the things that will happen to them is that they will develop the disorder. Vulnerability within this model can be traced to genetic, biological, or psychological history, and because of that, because there's nothing specific, because it can be like practically anything, people like the diathesis-stress model. One source of difficulty in explaining schizophrenia is that people vary greatly in their psychotic presentations, and this is quite true, but this makes sense. Let's pretend we're in combat. And we have a whole squad of individuals, 9 guys, and those individuals come under fire. Will all of them react exactly the same? Of course they will. Of course they will. Maybe you'll get 3 or 4 different reactions. Potentially, and hopefully you won't get 9 different reactions. They have been trained, of course, but potentially you'll get 3 or 4 different reactions. It's exactly the same way with schizophrenia. It's not combat, of course, but at the same time, the same stress will cause different reactions from different people. If I'm under stress and Chris is under stress, then I might squeal like a little girl, and Chris, of course, will go, tough it up, you cowboy up, buddy, come on, cowboy up. Which is what they say up north. You know, we may have different reactions to exactly the same thing. And eventually, of course, we may eventually react exactly the same after time, but our initial reactions, of course, won't be the same. The evidence gives the impression that there are many paths to the disorder. So the question is there only one disorder? Or could it possibly have a lot of different forms? Is this only one disease, or is it maybe 5 or 6 different diseases? Mental illnesses, excuse me, I didn't mean diseases, I meant mental illnesses. And possibly that's the way it is. And of course, those of you who are going to stay in psychology, by that time I'll be dead. Probably. I'm already almost 70 years old. So in the next 20 or 30 years, I may be dead, but you guys are going to have to decide what the hell's going on with schizophrenia. And maybe you'll decide just to get rid of it. You may decide to throw it out. You may decide that this is 5 different things, and none of them are what we will call schizophrenia anymore. Schizophrenia is an old word. It's an old idea. So potentially you'll just decide to get rid of it, and you'll come up with a new term. We come up with new terms all the time. It is possible that there are several different conditions with different etiologies, and that's exactly what I was just saying, different etiologies. Phenothiazine drugs were the first antipsychotic medications in the beginning. The most common variety was chlorpromazine or thorazine. We used to call it thorazine. Individuals taking this stuff were heavily sedated, and for that reason, if you asked them to come here, they would walk like this. And we refer to it as the thorazine shuffle, because that's about as good as they could do. So we call it the thorazine shuffle. They never fell over. It was kind of interesting. Anyway, we gave them chlorpromazine, and it worked. Chlorpromazine worked. It's a dopamine blocking drug, reduced the severity of the most disabling active symptoms, and allowed many seriously psychotic people to leave the institution in which they live. But of course, it made them feel dull. And nobody likes to feel dull. So the problem was that we couldn't keep these guys on this medication. And then, of course, they'd have another psychotic episode. Once they had another psychotic episode, they came back to the hospital. We'd give them thorazine again. And, of course, we watched them take their medication. And pretty soon, we could send them home again. We sent them home. They would do things like hide the pills under their tongues. You know how smart people are. Anyway, and then all of a sudden, of course, they're back in the hospital again. The typical antipsychotic drug, chlorpromazine, and other drugs with similar pharmacological activity are more effective than placebos and a number of other drugs, with about 60% treated subjects showing improvement in positive symptoms within 6 weeks. Even though we know that it starts occupying that dopamine receptor site almost immediately, it still sometimes will take up to 6 weeks for them to start reacting to it. However, there are drugs out there that actually do take 6 weeks to get into your system. And one of those drugs, or a series of those drugs, are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It takes about 6 weeks to get it into your system. So if you come to us and you're depressed, and we decide to give you Prozac or Zoloft or Paxil, we'll give you one of these pills, or we'll give you actually a bottle full of pills, and you'll start taking the pills, you'll start feeling better right away. Why do you start feeling better right away, despite the fact it hasn't even gotten into your brain yet? Why do you feel better right away? I'm sorry? Endorphins. Endorphins that are caused by the placebo effect. Thinking that you're going to get better makes you feel better, and you start producing more endorphins, and therefore, of course, now you actually are better. You are better. You're really better because of the placebo, because of the endorphins. Phenothiazines are not universally successful in reducing schizophrenic symptomology, and for that reason, there are a lot of people that don't think that it actually works. Some patients show only limited improvement, and a substantial number require continued hospitalization. Relapse is a significant problem, up to 50% according to one study. There are many troublesome side effects of phenothiazines, and this is one of the reasons why we don't give it to everybody now. And one of these side effects is called tardive dyskinesia. Tardive dyskinesia is where you have tics. Usually it's a facial tic. Sometimes it's a jerky shoulder. Sometimes it's a popping hand, where your hand pops up. But usually it's a facial tic. So what you'll do is you'll have this tic, and it goes all the time. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. We can't give you a drug that slows it down. We can't give you a drug that makes it stop. You'll do this the rest of your life. Tardive dyskinesia, I know it's a Anyway, sexual dysfunction is we see sexual dysfunction in between 30 to 80% of the patients. Why is there such a huge range between patients? Why? What's going on here? I mean, shouldn't we get statistics? Can't we know there are 15 out of 35 people that have sexual dysfunction? Shouldn't we know that?
Probably in different cultures it's different.
Turns out that's not the answer. But that makes a lot of sense. I like that answer. But that's not it. How many people like to talk about how often they have sex? Oh. Exactly.
Is that a trick question?
It is a trick question. So usually they only find out if they complain about it. But if they don't talk about it, if the patient doesn't talk about it, they don't ask them whether they're having sexual dysfunction. So that's the reason why we get this broad range of people, because people don't like to talk about sex. I mean, I think I asked you guys the question, what's a normal number of times you're supposed to have sex in a week? And of course, there is no answer. There's no answer. There may be an answer for select individuals, but there's not a correct answer for even a classroom full of people. A new generation of antipsychotic medications were introduced in the 1980s. The biggest problem was tardive dyskinesia. We saw this tardive dyskinesia. They were trying to force these patients to take this pill, and now all of a sudden we had lots and lots of problems because they were suffering from tardive dyskinesia. So we came up with new drugs that were sedating to the individuals, and they actually worked. These drugs, clozapine, risperidone, and olanzapine, sold as Chlorazil, Risperidol, and Zyprexa, block a broader range of receptors than first-generation drugs and have less serious side effects. However, they do have side effects. So pick your poison. What do you like? You like the tic, or do you want to die of agranulocytosis? Agranulocytosis is where you lose your white cells that fight off bacterial infections. That's your choice. Well, it's not your choice. The probability you're going to have tardive dyskinesia is like 50 or 60%. The probability you're going to have agranulocytosis is like 30 to 40%. Yeah. So let's go ahead and roll the dice and see what turns out. Anyway, that was the deal. Atypical antipsychotics were originally targeted for treatment-resistant patients. These have become first-line medications for the schizophrenic, for people suffering from schizophrenia. So originally we were just treating them, these individuals with that were resistant to phenothiazines with the atypical antipsychotics. But now, of course, we're treating everybody with this stuff. But then we discovered a problem. And that problem that we discovered was agranulocytosis. It hits a much smaller percentage. So what do you pick your poison. Once again, pick your poison. Once you get agranulocytosis, once again, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. We can give you white cells. We can spin white cells down and give you white cells. I'm sorry? How do we give you white cells? Okay, we draw a pint of blood out of somebody, and it's all red, right? So then we take it and we spin it real slow, but it makes all the heavier cells go to the bottom. Okay. So it separates the serum from the red cells and the white cells. And the white cells are heavier than the red cells, so they go all the way to the bottom. So then we draw off all the rest of it and just leave the white cells, and then we give you the white cells. No. You also get the platelets, so congratulations, you get platelets as well.
But it can't cure the infection that we're actually looking for.
No, we kill it. Unfortunately, and that's just in select individuals. We all have our own biochemical structures, and we're not all the same. During the Korean War, we started giving people, wounded soldiers, we started giving them sulfa drugs, everybody, because the assumption was everybody's the same. Well, it turned out that everybody was the same except for African Americans. And about 50% of them would develop leukemia from the sulfa drugs. So we were killing them rather than curing them.
Didn't some get diagnosed with Agent Orange?
That was written out. I was talking about. Yeah, we gave them all, everybody the same, pretending that everybody's exactly the same. It's just the way it works. Everybody's the same. Well, most of you guys can probably take not heroin, can take morphine, and it will help you. But I can't. If I take morphine, it doesn't work on me. That's the.
Let me write that down.
Yeah, don't write that down. Write something else down. Okay. So we're not the same. If you drink your Coke, you'll probably have a reaction to the caffeine, potentially. Nah. Okay. Some people drink coffee in the morning. Poor Marius, he calls me up on the telephone. I don't have any coffee. Do you have any coffee? I need some coffee. This morning. He lives right next door. So my wife, I don't drink coffee. It doesn't do anything to me, so I took him over the rest of the coffee. Marius Brigade, yeah. Marius Brigade. I saved his life, okay? You can tell him I said that too, okay? Oh, he's fun. Drug discontinuation remains a major problem in the treatment. The problem is nobody wants to feel stupid, and that's what it makes you feel like, because it makes you feel dull. So if you've got the Thorazine shuffle or you're using an atypical antipsychotic, people don't like that feeling. So they don't continue to take their medication. Out of any year, the average schizophrenic will only take about 6 months of their medication. Now remember, they're having really irrational thoughts. So they think that they're smarter than the doctors. They think that they're smart, they think that they're smarter than everything. They think that they're getting messages from outer space. So they think that they can control their own medication. And it turns out, of course, they can't. And they go off of it, then they have a psychotic episode, then they get thrown in the psych ward up on the 5th floor or whatever. And they're in there for a week and a half. We give them their medications again. They look normal, so we stop. They start looking normal, so we let them out of the hospital. They stay on their medications for a couple of weeks, and then they go off of them again, and in a couple of weeks they're back on the 5th floor. And now we go through the same cycle over and over and over again. And that's the way it normally works with people that are suffering from psychoses. Their brain, this is what their brain is telling them. The way that you know what reality is because you see it and you know what it looks like. Now, your reality is probably very similar to mine, but if you're schizophrenic, your reality ain't nothing like that, or nothing like the psychologist. And that's just the way it works. So these people think that they're normal. A lot of these mental illnesses, these people think that they're normal. And of course they're not. Most people are not communicating with aliens from outer space and have to wear the aluminum hat in order to keep the messages from coming in.
So 6th floor here is considered
I think it's a 5th floor. Well, yeah, that's a good point. The psychologist section. Yeah, maybe. You may be right. Where's Sarah now? Is she on the 2nd floor? No. Yeah,
That's why she moved.
It's right,
Solitary.
yeah, you're probably right.
Solitary confinement.
You know, they do lock the doors when we're in there, and they only let us out for class. It's kind of interesting. This is a sad story. What time is it? What am I doing? 3:22. Okay. No, 4:22. What time is it? 3:22. 4:20, right? 4:20. Okay. 3:20. 3:22. All right. Now we're going to talk about depression and mood disorders and suicide. Probably the most frequently diagnosed mental illness that we have is depression, major depression. Let me tell you the story of this young lady in the orange sweater. For over 6 months, Beatrice was completely irrational and extremely irritable. She sobbed in despair or screamed in anger at every dirty dish left on the coffee table or sock on the bedroom floor. Of course, we all do the same thing, don't we? Scream at all those things. Meals were a nightmare. She had her whole family on pins and needles. She wondered if they wouldn't have been better off dead, or them dead, or her dead, at least away from her. As a branch manager at a large chain store, she couldn't cope at work either. Unable to make decisions at work, she would ask employees with much less expertise for advice and then agonize over her decisions. She couldn't make decisions. Beatrice's husband tried to ease her life by taking over more of the housework, cooking, and childcare, but it just made Beatrice feel guilty and worthless because she wasn't doing what all women are supposed to do. That's Beatrice. She wanted to do the household chores like a normal person. But she broke down at the slightest difficulty to a perfect job. She got worse, and many days she couldn't go to work. What's her problem? She's suffering from depression. Depression is a low, sad state in which life seems dark and its challenges overwhelming. If you've ever been depressed, it's like living in a fog. It's like running into a gray wall, and you can't get through it, you can't get over it, you can't get under it. When I take ibuprofen, I get depressed. Really, really depressed. And I'm like happy all the time. So it didn't take like 2 or 3 pills for me to figure out there's something really, really wrong. Is it me, or is it something else? Am I really depressed? And so I stopped taking the ibuprofen. All of a sudden, the sun came out again, and I realized, my God. Well, of course, I tried to do it a couple more times just for the fun of it. There's no fun in depression. I can tell you that right now. So it only took a couple more times before I decided that I had abnormal reaction to ibuprofen. So when I take it, and it's about 11% of the population cannot take ibuprofen because it makes them depressed. Well, they don't tell you about this side effect. I don't remember reading it on the label. It's, if you pull that thing out, it's like over here. So, yeah, but they don't tell you though.
How long would it take me to recognize that?
It was like almost immediate. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah. I was in Mississippi at the time. Ibuprofen used to be a prescription drug. You couldn't get it over the counter. There was no Advil. There was no. Is there out there? But that stuff didn't. Motrin is the other stuff. So if you wanted ibuprofen, you had to get it from the doctor. And they gave it to you in 200 milligram pills, 500 milligram pills, and 1,000 milligram pills. I'm sorry?
Do a lot of people react to that like that?
About 11% of the population.
So I give my daughter ibuprofen.
Well, I mean, if you give her the medication and negative things happen, I know, don't give it to her just in case.
Well,
But try to tell a doctor that. Doctors are stupid. They think that everybody's exactly the same. It's important to do. Next time you go to the doctor and he does something stupid, tell him how stupid it is and tell him that I'm the one that said he was. Makes him look like he's an asshole. See, that didn't make the tape.
If I want to become a doctor.
That's okay. Don't do anything illogical. Please don't do anything illogical. As long as you don't do anything illogical, then I will harass you. I'll try not to anyway. Okay. The other end of the mood spectrum, of course, is mania. So we have depression and then we have mania. Mania is a state of euphoria or frenzied energy, which gives people the idea that they can do no wrong, that the world is their oyster. People that take crystal meth get the same feelings as mania. As a matter of fact, that's the reason we know that what crystal meth does to you, because we can compare it to people that are suffering from the manic depression, mania of manic depression. When people swing from depression to mania, of course, it's known as bipolar disorder. We used to call it manic depression, but now, of course, we call it bipolar disorder. That people are going back and forth between the two poles. They are cycling between the two poles, and usually it is a cycling. They don't just like all of a sudden become manic and then the next second they're depressed. It doesn't work that way. They usually cycle through it. In the DSM-5, mood disorders are largely defined by mood episodes that function somewhat like diagnostic building blocks. The components include major depressive episodes, manic episodes, and hypomanic episodes. Hypomanic episodes are low-level mania. So you feel good and you know that you're not feeling normal. You feel really damn good today. Maybe the sun came out and you're feeling that. That's hypomania. Hypo means a little, mania means, erratic ideas. So it's a little bit of an erratic idea. These components do not constitute diagnoses in themselves, but their presence or absence is essential in most diagnoses. Major depressive episodes are distinguished by duration. How long did they last? Normally it has to last for at least a 2-week period of constant depression in order to be diagnosed. Degree of disturbance. Let's say you were depressed today. So you're feeling really bad today. Can I diagnose you with major depressive disorder? No, it has to be perpetual. It has to be over a period of time. We all have bad days. We all get the blues. I know I was listening to it on the radio on my way in, listening to the blues guitar on the radio. See, I'm cool. I listen to blues. I'm not that boring. I don't always listen to Barry Manilow. Not every day. Barry Manilow. Are you okay? You're worried about Barry Manilow. Okay, degree of disturbance, at least 5 symptoms at present. One of these symptoms has to be either a depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. Okay, this sounds like people are smoking pot, doesn't it? When you smoke pot, it makes you really goofy giddy, right? You know what happens? Goofy giddy. When they're not smoking pot, how do they act?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Hungry.
They were hungry after when they were smoking the pot.
They're all hungry.
They're not hungry now. They've already eaten it. So how are they acting?
I mean, I'm trying to think about that movie, Pineapple Express.
Oh, okay. Okay, so somebody's been smoking pot, and they look at the palm of their hand, and they go, wow, look at those brains. Oh, that's the coolest thing in the whole wide world. Have you ever looked at the back of your head? Man, it's so cool. So when they're not smoking pot, what happens to all that interest and curiosity and everything? It's gone. So everything's boring to them. Oh man, this is the most boring video game I've ever played. Nothing makes them happy. They have what they call ahedonia. They can't find pleasure or interest in anything. So a chronic pot user, when they're not using pot, they haven't smoked their pot today, then potentially they will act ahedonic. In other words, they can't find pleasure in anything. As interesting as that is. I know, they're fun people. Yeah, let's legalize it for everybody in the United States. That way we'll have to stay stoned all the time, or we'll be bored out of our gourds. Right? Just a thought. Empirical. Major depressive episodes must represent a change from previous functioning. Some people may experience psychotic symptoms, and this is kind of a problem because they act psychotic. They act like they may be hallucinating, or they have delusions. So are they schizophrenic? Do they have schizoaffective disorder? Do they have schizoform disorder? Or is it major depression? It all depends on how long this lasts. If they have hallucinations and delusions and they last for an extended period of time, then that's schizophrenia. If they don't, then it's probably just major depression. I say just major depression because we can treat major depression easier than we can treat schizophrenia. If we treat schizophrenia, what do we hit them with? What do you hit them with? You hit them with the atypical antipsychotics or the phenothiazine. That stuff will lay you on your keister. And you don't want to do that to like everybody coming around the corner because you'll just lay them down. So we can treat these other guys with Prozac. It's an easy pill to give, and it takes 6 weeks for it to work. But I mean, they're going to start feeling better, and these psychotic symptoms are going to go away just with Prozac or Paxil or Zoloft. A distinction must be made between a major depressive episode and the normal depressive symptoms associated with bereavement. For instance, and then this is a problem, and of course I've talked to several individuals about this. Sheldon, are you still doing your paper on grief? Okay. I've talked to several individuals about this, including Sheldon, and one of the problems we have is how much can you bereave? How much grief can you have? How long is your grief supposed to last? I know. This is a problem. Remember we had the 9/11. 9/11, the planes flew into the World Trade Center and killed 2,376 people or whatever it killed. Anyway, it killed a bunch of people. And a lot of these individuals lived in New York City. So an individual that was at Columbia University started doing research on grief, trying to figure out how long these people would stay depressed, or whether depression was normal. That was the question. Are you supposed to cry? If you cry, how long do you cry? If you grieve, how long do you grieve? That was the question. And these people were all different religions, all different spiritual structures. And what they determined was, most people don't grieve for an extended length of time. It's too painful for the brain. The brain can't handle it. So if you stay unhappy, your brain is going to try to make you happy. It's going to try to do something to make you feel better. So you can't grieve for an extended length of time. And the question is, how long is it? How long can you do that? And he tried to come up with an answer. The guy's name was Bonanno.
How would that affect your brain, like your structure, your receptors, chemical imbalance?
Now remember, when you're depressed, usually when you're depressed, your serotonin level is low, so you get an regulation of serotonin receptor sites, so that you'll start feeling happier. And that's normally what happens with people. So they'll be sad, they'll be really sad in the beginning, and it'll last for about a week, and then eventually they'll start feeling better. You know, they'll start having intrusive thoughts. They'll start thinking that they can talk to the deceased individual. So that's the question. Now this culture, and correct me if I'm wrong, well, let's let Sheldon tell us what this culture does as far as grief is concerned, without getting in trouble. If I did it, I'd get in trouble.
I would give you I guess one of the options is to grieve for 4 days.
4 days.
Yeah, and that's about it. Anything more than that is considered, that's like overdoing it.
Okay.
And then you're putting yourself in a state of deep depression for yourself.
Right. Right.
If that's it.
Can it lead to hoarding?
I'm sorry?
Can it lead to hoarding, like hoarding things?
Hoarding?
Yeah.
Collecting things that person had. My mother died, when did my mother die? 2014, and I still have the pill bottle that she was using when she died. Is that hoarding? I still have the combs that she had.
Yeah.
It's only one thing. It's only 3 things.
But some people, they keep
Right.
a lot of
A lot of things.
and they continue on.
Right. Right. And every time they look at it, it makes them feel bad. Yeah. No, that's not good. When I look at my mother's pill bottle, I just swear like a sailor. Unfortunately, I came here in 2016, so I was still suffering from swearing that my mother was. Okay. It's a joke, Travis. Come on. Okay. So that's the question. So bereavement in the old days, I'm talking about the DSM-4-TR. In the DSM-4-TR, bereavement was part of the depressive symptoms. They talked about bereavement, but now they have separated it in the DSM-5, and it's because of Bonanno's research that they separated it. They separated it because most people are resilient. Most people will get over a death eventually. And when I say eventually, it's like 6 months. And then they have no symptoms whatsoever. And they don't become deeply depressed. Most people don't. Okay? Okay. Thank you, Sheldon, for explaining that. And I'm sorry that I keep talking about the people up north, but they do things a little bit differently. They're buffalo hunters. You guys, I'm not sure what you guys think.
What were you hunting?
Buffalo? Oh, we talked about buffalo.
Monkey.
Monkey.
Dogs.
Hey. Okay.
Prairie dogs.
Lizards and prairie dogs. Okay. They were buffalo hunters. So they would, of course, and they powwow. You guys don't powwow, but they powwow.
Wild pow.
Wild pow. You guys wild pow, and they powwow. So the difference is that when somebody dies, they allow them to grieve for a year, and if they don't come back into the social structure, they dance them back into the circle. They bring them into a powwow and they dance them. They have a special dance for them, and they dance them back into the circle. They're only allowed to grieve.
They feast till they eat.
They feed.
Monthly,
No mutton. No
like
mutton.
twice a month they would eat, and they would celebrate the death.
Right.
And then the second one would be more of like a humble kind of like a feast where they share memories.
Right.
So every time they do that, they're actually, that happens throughout the whole day. So when they do that, they're actually gaining. There was an article that was about her, it was related to death
But they're remembering happy things. They're not
Yeah.
relating unhappy things. And by talking about them as if they're still alive, or the things that they did while they're alive, it allows them to get over the loss of this select individual. And then they dance them back into power. A year after, that's not a year after, what is it, a year and 6 months or something like that, they have a giveaway where they give away their stuff. So you're talking about hoarding, and that happens. They'll give away their horses, they'll give away their cars, if they had anything special that was theirs, they'll give away their guns, that kind of thing, depending on who it was. If it's a female, they'll give away their pots and pans. They'll have a giveaway, and it's really kind of cool. I mean, yeah, it's like the only time anybody ever gave me anything.
How about their companion?
They've already moved on. Yeah, but see, everybody does things differently, and that's okay. That's fine. There's a group in the Philippines. They mummify their dead, and they put them up on a ledge, so that they can see, so that they can protect them. The dead are supposed to protect the people that are living, so they put them up on this ledge so that they can watch them all the time. I know, it's really kind of weird. When I was working in the cemetery in California, the National Cemetery, and one of the individuals that died was one of these people, and we had to bury this guy. Well, their traditions are that they put them up on a ledge, and of course we couldn't do that. You know, this is a national cemetery, we can't have a mummy sitting there. So, but the only thing we could do was allow them to watch them being put into the grave. Normally we didn't allow that. We didn't allow people to come out and watch them being put into the grave. But the whole family came out and watched this person into the grave. I know, that's the only thing we could do. It was really kind of interesting. Different group, different ideas. Okay, so bereavement is one of the things we have to talk about. 420, right?
Yeah.
It's 3:42.
Okay, unfortunately, we have to take a survey, and so we're going to stop right now. We're going to stop this thing right now.